give you an update on where we are with COVID, and then also some of the other things that we have in the department. I didn't prepare anything formal because the span of it could be 2 hours or 30 minutes. So briefly, I will say this on COVID. Since the beginning of the response, right? So my role, for those that don't know, I'm Aaron Miller, the county's director of public safety, communications, and emergency management. So I've got 911 and emergency management. And when the county has an incident or a large emergency, one of the roles that I take on is in what we call the unified command role. And so together with Dr. Varghese, sort of manage the structure and function of how the county responds to the whole of county approach to incidents, emergencies, or disruptions to our operations. And so since the beginning of this, I will tell you, technology has been sort of at the forefront of either solving problems or creating them in the way that this has happened. Where we are now is, I will say, things have gotten a little bit better, but we remain at the bottom of the food chain. There is there is in this instance, I think, the accountability of a local government, right, being the touch point of its residents and of its community, is absolutely more true here than it has ever been. Working across systems that have been designed while we're in the middle of the pandemic, or otherwise not exactly suited for some of the response, and being utilized in order to effectuate, for instance, right now, vaccine rollout. And so it is a daily basis. On a daily basis, it is one of the items that we have folks working on, attempting to, for instance, deduplicate data across a host of databases or registration systems, create data connections between disparate systems and fields. The call this afternoon about working with some of the hospital record systems and the latest challenges that we have with that. And so really everywhere you look within our response to this, there is some aspect that is touched by technology. So look, rather than bore, I'm happy to answer questions. I think that's all of you are very well engaged and highly up to date residents and Democratic process. I have full faith that, much like your counterparts, Emergency Preparedness Advisory Commission, that you stay well informed, up to date. So rather than drone on, I know what you want is questions and answers. I'm happy to flip over to that and give you whatever I can.
Great, thanks, Aaron. Questions from the team? I'll give it out to the members first, and then I'll follow up, Aaron, with some. Any?
I have some
Jackie?
questions, but
I'm
I didn't want to jump in and hog the first question. So
no, go ahead, and then Frank.
Okay, I don't know actually whether this is an IT or an emergency management, certainly both question. I got a question from the public recently, and it's one of the ones that we've been getting sort of throughout is, how do you know where you are on the list? And someone sent me the link to the Fairfax dashboard and said, why can't we have something like this? And the thing that they liked about the Fairfax dashboard is it tells you how many are currently registered and on the waiting list, and what date registration date is currently being served. And so people can figure out within a week when they're likely to get to that area of the list. And I'm presuming this is partly using the new Virginia list base or combining the two or something. But I was wondering, who does this? And is it something that Arlington can do if Fairfax is able to do it?
There's really two parts to your question there that I need to separate. One is sort of the art, and I'll call it an art, not a science, of forecasting when, and where somebody is in line. And then the second one, sort of in general about the databases. So let me start with this.
This doesn't tell people where they are in line. They have to know that themselves. This says the people being served now signed up February 27th.
Yeah.
And there's this many people on the list.
Yeah. Okay. Understood. So let me start just generally with lists and databases and information. At the beginning of the time when we were supposed to be soliciting information from the general public about interest in vaccine and where they were supposed to be and where they wanted to be in line. The health districts, so each of the health districts within Virginia, right, work under the Virginia Department of Health. It's a public
Right.
health that's centralized. Were essentially not provided much guidance and said, go forth and get this information.
Right.
At the same time, the Virginia Department of Health put up, at that point, it was just sort of like a general interest tool, right? It wasn't even a registration tool.
Yep.
And that was up for just a short period of time. Since then, we have had no fewer than 3, I would say, public-facing changes in the way that we take pre-registration.
Yep, I've been watching.
Right. And so every one of those, though, has been followed by substantive changes on the back end. One of the primary things in building out a database is what, right? To identify a primary key, or those data fields that are going to be unique identifiers for records within the database. As late as last week, the state changed how they identify records and what they consider to be primary keys within the database. I know you're thinking that's crazy, but
no, I've been watching it.
Yeah,
it is crazy.
Yeah. And so the result of that, right, is that data hasn't grown in a horizontal fashion the way that we would expect it, right? Sort of moving from a larger system down to subsystems. It's actually grown horizontally in that there have been more stovepipe silos, copies of data, and things just get mashed together and put into one. So right now, what we are working with, we in Arlington have worked through all of the individuals that pre-registered on our survey that we had been told to set up using a tool that we had set up internally. We have invited everyone who is on that pre-registration list who is eligible through the age category, 65 and older, 16 to 64 with underlying health conditions. We still have individuals on that list from the essential worker category because the Virginia Department of Health still tells us to get essential worker information. Vaccinate Virginia is the state's preferred source for all pre-registration information, and they're asking everyone to put that, to direct people to that source and use that as the primary source for how we invite in the list from which we pull in order to schedule people for a vaccination.
Yep.
The state took all of the databases that they had, as well as what we submitted to them. You may remember this fiasco.
Yes.
Some names, and they literally just dumped it into the database.
Mm-hmm.
Dirtiest data you have ever seen.
Yeah.
And some of those don't have, for instance, fields that match with character requirements or any number of other things. Fairfax, because it is 5 times larger and has 5 times the amount of funding, and because it is sort of the large public health division within the Northern Virginia region, has the ability to push back in ways that other health districts don't, period, plain and simple. They also have resources that we simply don't have in order to build some of these systems. And they were able to successfully convince the governor that they were going to go at it on their own. In the back end, though, they have had to create a lot of processes and patches to reconcile data between systems. And part of the reason that we had to go into the state system and work off the state database was because it was made known to us that that is how the state was going to be deciding allocating vaccines at some point in the future, based on the number of people you have pre-registered, which only makes sense. And so for us, there is obviously a drawback to not doing that. If they don't have data, they can't allocate you vaccine based upon it. I would absolutely love to be able to provide that type of dashboard, but I will say that doing that requires a level of cooperation from the state that we have been unable to get. And, you know, we frankly don't control our own destiny in some aspects of data of this event. We become the end user. And so, you know, that's where it is. I mean, that's
the state, pardon me, the state can't tell you how many people we have on our list. I mean, you know, on the pros and cons of going under the state system, if they're going to use our registration for our allocation, you'd think they could tell us what it is.
Well, the state can tell us, but I can tell you that number doesn't mean anything. So I'll give you an example. I was on a call last week and they said, you have 2,100 people that are registered as child care providers that are in the system that show as pre-registered. And I asked the question, have you verified through VIS, the vaccine information system, that all of those individuals have not yet been vaccinated at another locality using another email address or you know, some other fashion, right? For instance, going to Pennsylvania. I know people that have been to Pennsylvania to go get vaccinated. The state's answer was no, we haven't done any reconciliation on that. So we don't know if that data is actually good. Well, that's no good, right? I can't really make any operational decisions based on that. And that is the case for a good segment of some of their data, right? It's missing, for example, age or underlying medical condition information. All it has is a name and an email address. And with that, I can't categorize that person and put them into a slot in order to get a vaccine, which is why the state has been sending record reminders to update, you know, your records in Vaccinate Virginia.
Thanks. That's a extensive answer. It's sort of disappointing because it makes it seem like if we went on our own and had more resources, then we would have been able to do it. But the state is not providing the service that reciprocally where they demanded that we go with them.
Mary, did you want me to?
Okay, yeah. Frank, go ahead.
Thanks. Thanks, Aaron. Appreciate all the hard work on the vaccines. I'll pivot to a different topic, which you might find some relief. A topic that we've actually covered in our commission for several years was FirstNet, the nationwide public safety broadband network. But then this month, Verizon made a big announcement with its Frontline offering, and I just wanted to see where Arlington is on either one of those.
Yeah, great question. So Arlington is the FirstNet adopter. This is my FirstNet device. We have used FirstNet for a fair amount of time here, both on our mobile device, also broadband access, or mobile apps, camera trailers, license plate readers, actually as a backup to a couple pieces of critical infrastructure. The thing that we love about FirstNet and the difference in Verizon, yes, both of them provide priority and preemption. Both of them have their own separate core. You can have your conversations all day about whether it's better to have a physical core or a virtual core when you put it, whatever. The point is that they both have their own separate core, separate routing system, and offer end-to-end, essentially end-to-end service call handling for public safety, but critical communication, right? Definitely data, definitely voice mobile, getting to the point where we can have a lot more mission criticality and voice to support radio over LTE, things like that. The difference is that FirstNet, because of the way that it was set up through the NTIA and through the FirstNet Commission, on the board of FirstNet is an elected local representative, a local government representative, right? I happen to know a couple of folks on there because I do some other work through some DHS things that I sit on, the SLTT GCC, which is a local government coordinating council. Um, that representation is critically important because when my point of view wants to be heard, little old Arlington County, right, one of the smallest self-governing units within the entire country, doesn't really stand up to some of these bigger cities. Frankly, Verizon is going to answer the call from New York before they're going to answer the call from me because that contract is a little bit bigger. With local representation on the governance board of FirstNet, I essentially am a shareholder, right? I'm not a shareholder in Verizon. They have little to no accountability to me other than the fact that I'm going to tweet about them or they're going to get bad PR like they did for the California incident last year, year before. That's why I personally like FirstNet. That's one of the robust things and the robust engagement with stakeholders that I enjoy. Other than that, I would say, you know, Jack and his team have been great, particularly Richard and Rick Sternitsky, about assessing apples to apples and breaking down for us so that public safety can make an informed decision. And, you know, so far, so good. Knock on wood. Oh, and then the other thing is the number of Band 14 sites that we've got up here through the roof. Like, you know, a couple of federal installations have some, and they may or may not be abiding by the FCC guidelines on transmission limits and, you know, have dialed it up to 11. So we get some pretty good throughput. Even on an iPhone XR standing out in the middle of the street, we get some really good data speeds, and saw those good data speeds in a number of critical events. We did some field tests and stuff like that for large events 2 years ago, some of the rallies. So
Great, thanks, Aaron. Mike.
Thanks, Aaron. I'll start with empathy. I know that you're in a bit of a pickle here, and I'd say, in my judgment, when our commission is at its best, it's not about kind of criticizing the here and now, but about anticipating, you know, what will be necessary in the future and trying to make that become available to operational managers like you in the county so it's there when you need it. And I have to say, we've not been able to do that as well as I personally would like. But in this instance, I would say, have electronic medical records been of any use in this situation? Because when I worked at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, there was $2 billion of federal money spent to subsidize the creation of electronic medical records that would be shareable. And if I was looking for some of the data points that you've already mentioned, like how old is this person? What pre-existing conditions do they have? Do they have a shot or not? I immediately think of electronic medical records. I'm afraid you're going to tell me that they're not really suitable for this purpose, or they're not accessible to the county. And let me just stack up a few and you can comment on them or just say good riddance. Another, which is not a technology idea at all, but is the basic notion of expectancy theory in customer service. And I'll just use myself as an example. If somebody had told me a year ago that it was probably going to take a couple years to find an effective vaccine and then another year to produce it, and I could expect to get a vaccine in 2.5 years, I probably would have said, hey, I'm okay with that. That's the best we can do. The problem here seems to be self-inflicted in the sense that if you say to people, we're going to vaccinate you as fast as we can, you need to get on all these websites, we're going to do this, you create an expectation that you didn't need to create. And then you fail to meet the expectation that you, the government, in fact created. When I can understand why a person in elected office or a person in a position of authority would like to promise to people a faster vaccination. That's obvious. But somehow technocrats need to, you know, whether from the clinical world or the technology world, need to say, this is what's feasible. And for God's sake, don't get my customers expecting more than I can deliver. And then lastly, on the hit parade, I'll say I'm a little surprised by the criteria themselves. And stepping away from databases, I would say the interesting criteria to me for prioritization of vaccinations would have been current infection rate at a micro local level, mobility of the population that lives in that area, which would probably track with their occupations and their need to continue to go to work. And then finally, their household composition. So I don't really know how CDC at the federal level or the state came up with these particular criteria, but I think it would be relatively easy to suggest if we reran the models that we would have been better off with different criteria. So any of those things registering with you, and are there any of them that the commission could be particularly useful to helping you succeed in the future?
Yes. So actually, I'll take those in order. I'll try to be fast. I can be. What did my wife call me the other day? It's essentially not brief. So anyways, on the EMR side, yes, it would have been helpful, except that from day one, the federal government decided to take the pandemic playbook and not exactly follow it. I can't say that they moved it to the side because we did some things that we were supposed to do out of that playbook, but I'll give you a great example on the operational side. There is a pot of money that comes from HHS to a number of cities throughout the country called the Cities Readiness Initiative. Those of you who have been in the Washington region for a while may remember the anthrax events of the early 2000s. One of the things that we developed after the Tokyo subway incident was the Metropolitan Medical Response System, MMRS, and then the subsequent funding that supports that in CRI. And what CRI essentially was supposed to do is help cities deal with a number of threats, but one in particular was how to operationalize mass prophylaxis. So it was built on a pills to people model, but easily adaptable to do mass vax, right? From day one, despite the fact that we had that at the federal level, we chose not to utilize all of the pieces of it that we could have to make things easier. And one of those things was sort of how we dealt with health systems, health records, hospital systems, and local public health agencies. The other thing that's been particularly difficult for us, I will say, is while the electronic medical record world has made wonderful advancements, there is still not a buy-in from local elected officials, and Jack can slap me after this if I say this, that it is a necessary thing for local public health or local government to get involved with. And I what I mean by that is we our primary community health partner in Virginia Hospital Center, right, the former Arlington Hospital Center, we have a wonderful working relationship with them, but access to the information, a lot of bureaucratic hurdles in order to get over, right? In order to be able to share, in order to be able to move data back and forth the way that it needs to be moved. Some of those hurdles have been moved because of the pandemic, which is wonderful. Some of them still remain in place. But I will tell you, it is because when some folks look at a low frequency, high acuity event like this, where we would need to have access to this information in an unfettered, sort of, and obviously theoretically a de-identified way, right? We could do it where it's, fairly easy. That way we could make public health planning assumptions. They look at the cost and go, it's not worth it. And, I think that's got to change. I think that's, obviously we're going to see the attention cycle change after this. On the second part, on the expectancy theory, yeah. So part of it is because the way we chose to operationalize vaccine distribution has been what we as Americans love about Amazon is a just-in-time model. We don't, we are getting what comes right off the line. And when AstraZeneca doesn't come through, when AstraZeneca fails to meet the clinical criteria or have questions about, what the efficacy or safety of the vaccine is, that is no longer in the mix, right? We were banking on that as part of the planning assumption to be able to say, this is where we're going to be when we promise people where we were going to be with vaccination. It's part of the reason that Merck is now in business with Johnson & Johnson producing J&J vaccine. And yeah, I will say that even week to week, while we have been promised we would have a forecast, we still don't know week to week what we get. We have a reasonable expectation that it's going to be within 10% of what we had last week. But, next week, for example, it's more than that. It's, they tell us it's starting to open up, but there's still no great indication of how much it's going to open up. On the third part, the criteria, this is the difference. So in my free time, I'm a public health professional. I have a PhD in public health. It's actually in community health sciences. So population health and sort of these ideas and aspects. The criteria for which we decide vaccination priority is set by something called the ACIP, the Advisory Council on Immunization Practices. And they look at it at a population health basis, strictly from mortality and morbidity. And in a very classical model of how we would reduce disease at a population basis. And so, what you're talking, straight up a SEER model, right? The sort of infected and reinfected and what the susceptible population looks like. What you are talking about, I think, is the sort of future of dynamic modeling of disease spread and of threat susceptibility and things like that. But it is, in my mind, skews itself then to benefiting larger urban communities with denser populations, and politics plays into it. So while the ACIP can set the recommendations, because of our wonderful Constitution and the way that we are set, each governor has the ability to make slight changes and variation within the overall framework of what the CDC recommends and implements, right? You've seen that. We've done it here. The governor decided, wait a second, I want to move them up. So he's moved some of those groups up, and you've seen that in other states as well. It really is supposed to be designed to look at what, at the time, we thought were the most vulnerable characteristics of a population. Age, because we saw increased mortality, that was fairly easy to see. Disability and underlying medical conditions. We saw that certain conditions, including chronic heart conditions, liver, kidney, and chronic respiratory illness, were an issue. As we learned more about the disease, looking back at it, I think we would have changed some of those prioritizations simply because we've learned so much in the past 3 months, particularly about how it is mutated and what the other long-term systemic effects of the disease have been. So I'll stop there. Like I said, I go on all day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Aaron. Aaron, to that about what we've learned in moving forward, it sounds like it really is an integrated project team with you really at the lead, and then public health, and then Jack's team. Will there be an after action review really looking at how that integrated project team, what some of the, as you mentioned, the bureaucratic hurdles and some of those things that have really made your life difficult?
Yeah. So I will say this philosophically, I believe this event to be a watershed event in the history of emergency management and public health. Within our sort of recent history, the federal legislation governing emergency management and sort of our structure and how we respond to these things was only created in 73, 74, the Disaster Act, right? Then came the Stafford Act, and it has only been modified significantly in the past 20 years. One being 9/11, right, the creation of Homeland Security. The second being the Post-Katrina Emergency Management Reform Act, and the third being the Post-Sandy Recovery Act. I do think that this third sort of, or fourth, however you want to look at it, event is going to radically alter both our what we see as structure and function of emergency management. We didn't wait. We're not waiting for the end of this. We actually have a contractor. It's FEMA reimbursable, 100%. We're not paying for it. Your federal tax dollars at work. That is conducting an in-progress review. They gave us the first set of that in-progress review, which I called the initial response phase. It was from last March to about October, November. Talking about ramping up, building systems, getting through the initial push. We've received those results from them. They have both short and long-term recommendations. In the midst of all of this, I am working to get a group together of department directors to talk about specifically the short-term recommendations, because a lot of what we see now are the same things that we saw back in April, May, June. I'll give you some examples. Competing priorities within the public and within government. Then we were trying to figure out how to ramp down services in order to be able to better serve the public in COVID response. Now, what we're trying to figure out is how do we ramp back up services, libraries, right? Other walk-in services, restaurant services, whatever it may be. All of those things still require a county workforce behind them, but we're doing it in a competing world of trying to vaccinate for our community, 280,000 residents or whatever we're at from the census this year. And so that idea of competing priorities, we can't wait until after the event to figure out and have that discussion. So we're doing the in-progress review. I'm very proud of that. I think it's going to help us a lot. And it's also going to provide good historical documentation, because honestly, 6 months from now, my brain is going to be even more fried than it is now. And so capturing that information in the moment is critically important to be able to make some of the decisions down the road.
Great, thank you. Well, Aaron, we really appreciate you taking the time. And as Mike said, if there are some other things that you think of that the Tech Commission can assist with, that would be really helpful to us, because this is an area that we really think technology is playing and will play a critical role.
There's I'll leave you with this. There's a theory from one of my public policy classes. I always forget. I like it, but I forget what it's classically called. But it's the Kingdon model of policy streams. I call it the trash can theory. You have an opportunity with the streams of funding, with the streams of attention, with the streams of politics and policy. Oftentimes, our job is to push and pull them together to create the policy window. Right now, the policy window is so big you can drive a truck through it, right? You could literally pull a semi-truck through it. Things like reimagining workforce participation in government services. Jack called me one day, I think it was Estonia, I can't remember where it was. And, they didn't miss a beat, 100%, all services online. Every government service you need to access, you can't do it in person. You can also do it online. He said, look at this. So, being able to set that as a North Star, right? We've got the opportunity to do it. Second is the idea of distributed workforce, right? And distributed assets. I am very keen on this. I think we've seen vulnerability from not only, physical location, network vulnerability, whatever it may be. So, one of the things we worked on with DTS's help has been we can now take 911 calls and dispatch from people's houses. It's not something that we're going to do 100% of the time, but we have thousands of hours in and thousands of calls logged to date. January 6th happened, right? I needed more people to be able to answer 911 calls and dispatch. I was able to get people to get out of their chair watching television, log on, and take 911 calls to prepare for the surge. Absolutely phenomenal asset. More things like that are going to be critically important to us as we move forward. The disasters are more complex, more costly, more integrated. And so distributing sort of this idea of distributing our assets out and being able to add redundancy and resiliency, absolutely critically important. Technology is the backbone for doing all of that.
And Mary, if I could add
Great.
something too.
Sure,
Mary,
Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, Aaron's done an amazing job. Watching him in progress. Aaron and I both were at Katrina in New Orleans, and we're familiar with what happened there. And to see where we are right now, there's been this we've exposed the digital inequality side, and we see the big gaps. This whole area about healthcare response, is exposing a lot of things. In many ways, we're piecing together things we think are going to make a difference, but there's a cultural change, a change in structure that has to take place. And then when please challenge me back on this, but it's just the whole thing about exchanging electronic medical records. We lay a fiber chain from the free clinic to the hospital. Done deal, right? Done in April. There's no exchange of medical information. It's because the organization, the culture that's in place doesn't permit that. Now they're doing it, they're in the process of doing it, but as Aaron said, what happens is they're all working in their own stovepipe. And it was fine, that provision of healthcare service was fine prior to March last year. It's not fine any longer. And the integration Aaron's talking about and the new way of thinking how we provide for services. And Aaron, I watched Aaron from afar, and I mean, he's been whipsawed, if that'd be a fun word, by the state, by every day what he says is changed the next day, within hours. And so my hat's off to Aaron. The county is very, very fortunate to have Aaron Miller with us. Knowing your predecessors, Aaron, I don't think anyone could have done what you've done. So
well,
my hat's off to Aaron.
It is absolutely unequivocally a team effort. I can tell you that. I do not survive without all the folks, Jack's team, my team, all those folks. I cannot. I'm actually very glad they made a decision to come to Arlington. I will tell you that. Part of the reason was because of the folks who I knew I would work with has been stellar, and so thank you all. And look, unfortunately, it is easy to find me. So if you have questions or follow up. My phone number is floating around there on the internet. My cell phone number is floating around there on the internet. As much as I try not to give it, but my email is there, and it actually, my desk line, actually, thanks to Jack, rings to me wherever, sends me that fun voicemail. So I'm always happy to answer questions, and that's part of our job. So thank you all.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. And Mike, I'm assuming that's a leftover hand, or was there a follow-up question you had before Aaron exits? Is that another question? Okay. All right. You're on mute though. Okay. Was that a follow-up? Whoop. You're still on mute somehow. Frank, did you have a follow-up? Frank?
I did.
Okay, go ahead. You're not almost, Aaron. You almost got out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll try to keep it quick. I think you touched on it quickly. I was going to ask about the Emergency Operations Center. It sounds like I was asked during the worst part of the pandemic, staffing and all. It sounds like you've sort of addressed that. Has the county now fully adopted and implemented the next generation 911? That's another one that we've been sort of following over the years.
Yeah, briefly, enabled to go virtual has been big. I still believe that we need a physical location and a physical presence. There are some things that you have to have, obviously, for continuity, and then there are emergencies. For example, cyber. We know we're going to knock out some of our systems, and so having that physical location, I think, is critically necessary. We were able to stand that up, thankfully, because of some of the redundancies we have in other buildings, in space large enough to accommodate physical distancing, which was nice. So that was very good. Next Gen 911, yes. So the new call processing equipment is in. We share our CPE with Alexandria, full redundant systems, sister systems that are able to switch seamlessly between the two. CAD is next on the list. That's our goal. We will be the first. We're hoping to be the first integrated CAD system within the NCR. Right now, we share CAD to CAD data on the global data exchange server on the GDX, and then on the CAD to CAD exchange server that's hosted regionally. We want to go beyond that and have what I call sort of base level integration, and we think we're going to be doing that by sharing with Alexandria and hopefully Falls Church a platform, a CAD platform, and so that'll be very big. And yes, so we're sort of moving and preparing all things to be able to. We already accept text, but video is next on the list. New CAD will help us do that. All of those things. So we are funded for it, which is wonderful, and we are progressing, and I think that's near term.
One other thing I'd like to write while we have a chance before everyone leaves, a shout out to Kevin Broadhurst and Comcast. We had a need, Evan had a need to create for neighborhood health a vaccine clinic down at Macedonia Baptist Church, and frankly, we did not have the physical plan of Comcast to be able to do it. And I placed a call to Kevin, and Kevin jumped on it, and they provided a complimentary service, if I'm allowed to say that, Kevin, to the Macedonia Baptist, so that they could get internet access and provide for the clinic. So it's one of those events. I remember at 9/11 was the same way. You had businesses just lined up shoulder to shoulder and said, "What do you need done? We'll get it done." So thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, Jeff, we're happy to do that. And I think it's just kind of a good way that we can kind of help support the vaccine distribution. We want to get everybody vaccinated and get back to life as somewhat close to normal. So glad to do it. So
okay.
Thank you, Kevin.
Great. John, you had a comment, and Aaron, you're almost out. I think Jackie, and
Don't worry.
then you can exit. John, you had a comment for the commission?
No, I'll hold mine until Aaron's done. It was more of
Okay.
a discussion.
Okay, Jackie?
Yes, I really
Go
just
ahead.
wanted to thank, since we have the opportunity to have both of them on the line at the same time, Aaron and Jack, because in the same time as you described earlier, the national process has had to be shortcut from what we might have thought was going to be 5 years. The only reason why it works is because Arlington and not that there's anyone like us, but is because Arlington also shortcutted. There were things that you were thinking about and planning to do that I know had 3 and 4 year timeframes,
Oh, yeah.
and we've seen those become operational in a matter of months.
Yeah.
So to me, what you accomplished, even, and you talked about March, in March to October, which wasn't visible to the public except in the product, is phenomenal. So thank you very much.
Appreciate that.
All right, kudos. Excellent. All right, Aaron, thank you so much.
Thank
We
you
really
all.
appreciate it, and best of luck. And we hope that when you get some of those arrows, you can think about some of the kudos you got here. All right.
So, thank you all. It's nice to
All
see you.
right. You take care. Thank you. John?
Yeah, it's just Aaron's comments about the interoperability and sharing of data between health systems to enable public health and emergency response. I think, triggered in my mind. I think one of the primary impediments to that is the failure of health electronic medical records providers to develop interoperable systems.
Yes.
And it occurs to me that we have an annual legislative agenda and that we might want to work on a proposal. I'm not sure off the top of my head the level of influence that Virginia Commonwealth government could have over that, but I do believe that the Commonwealth is responsible for issuing certificates of need to enable medical systems and hospitals to exist and expand, and that the Commonwealth might be able to exert some influence on encouraging the interoperability of health electronic medical records between health systems in the Commonwealth and local health departments. So that's just a thought that I wanted to throw out there for feedback from the commission and see whether or not we wanted to work that as a potential legislative priority.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mike, go ahead. And then Frank. Mike?
Yeah, I would definitely support that, John. And I don't know the intricacies of the state level, but we should definitely try to leverage these things. And I would also say Aaron's answer to that was more in the line of typical public health studies, where you'd want to have access to the data, but you would agree to anonymize it because you don't really need individual people's identities. In this instance, I think our position is even stronger because in this instance, the county is playing the role of a clinician. We're trying to administer a vaccination to this person. So I'll bet you any releases that were signed by patients, for example, at Virginia Hospital Center, basically give Virginia Hospital Center permission to share the data as needed with other clinicians in the treatment environment. So it's entirely possible that what we were calling the culture leads people to be opposed to sharing data, even when the law would allow it, and they need to be told by their employer that they must share it. So in this instance, when Arlington is acting as a clinician, I think an awful lot of the health privacy concerns go out the window, other than Arlington has to take care of the data that they administered the shot, the same way the other people who have access to the medical record have to keep private the things that they did with the individual patient. But the whole idea of making the records electronic and to make them shareable was exactly this type of situation. And we're not seeing the return on the investment.
Yeah. John, did you have a response? And then Jackie? Oh, you're good. Okay. Jackie? Thanks, Mike. Did you raise hand or were you?
Yes,
Okay,
yes. I, while in theory, this sounds good, I am concerned if we start thinking of government entities as the same level of clinical as a private clinic or doctor that you sign with. And I do think the public would view extending their records to government as being slightly different than other circumstances where they do it doctor by doctor. And with respect to privacy from government, I think that is one of the other things that some people have been watching with some concern, because putting all of this into a national database managed by the CDC creates one of the most detailed and personal databases available to government to date. Now, it's true, not everybody registers to get a vaccine. But for all of those that do, including undocumented people and everything else, it gives the government contacts for very high personal contacts, not a census, which is anonymous, but personal contacts for a very high percentage of our population.
Good
and
comments.
medical records. I mean,
Right.
I fear for that.
Yeah, so those are, but yeah, to your point, this is an item that we need to put on, put on the agenda, because this is not going to be the last pandemic.
Yeah, can I respond briefly?
Sure, Mike, go ahead.
So I don't by any stretch want to just open the medical records up to anyone who's in a clinical role. But I want to say, I'll just use myself an example because I can't violate my own privacy. So my electronic medical record resides with the private sector organization called PMA. They are not going to be the people who administer my vaccination. What good is my medical record if it doesn't have my vaccination status in the pandemic? So it just needs to be enough access for Arlington to say, we administered this shot to this patient, and it needs to be represented in the medical record that is primarily maintained by PMA. And then in the instance where the county is saying, we're attempting to give shots to everybody who's 85 years old who lives in the county, for the physicians and the clinicians to say, from my roster of patients, these are the ones that are 85 years old, and honest to God, we do want them to get a vaccine. We don't think that they would value us holding their privacy as more important than their access to a vaccine. So we're going to share with you the fact that these people live in Arlington and they're over 85 years old. So it's not a carte blanche access, it's a situational access for the purpose of healthcare delivery and maintenance of the shared record.
It's a slippery slope.
Yeah, and I don't, Jackie, I don't want to get too far down into the solution. I guess what I'm asking is, do commissioners feel like this is an area worthy of investing the limited volunteer resources that we have on working on drafting a proposal, a legislative priority proposal to send to the county delegation, or do we think it's not feasible?
So why don't we, John, we can have a proposal in April just to go forth, right, with that.
Yeah, well, I'm good. I got the 1% of the inspiration part of it, but I would need some help with the other 99%.
Yeah,
if someone wanted to.
Right.
If someone was interested.
I think it's a good. I think we can find two or more to work on that, and then see how the rest of the group responds. So lots of good, and Jack, David, thanks for making sure that we got to Aaron and were able to. That was really helpful. David, you want to give us the update from DTS? Anything you want to make sure we know?
Yeah, sure. Kind of dovetailing on what Aaron was talking about with the data. That seems to be our life right now, is working with the data. We've been, I guess, for lack of better words, thrashing on that and working on it, and then basically normalizing it, and kind of, as Aaron said, merging a lot of different data sources together to be able to generate and kind of get to one list. And it's been a very challenging situation. I think we've made some really good headway, as Aaron said, on on that data front. But also, as he said, just kind of the, a bit of the front line, it's very difficult to work with this. As he indicated, a lot of the IDs have changed, stuff like that. It's kind of been in flux almost daily. So it makes it really challenging for us to get to things. Having said that, as I mentioned, we have made very positive inroads into how to kind of normalize this, and we're developing stuff kind of in-house. We call it the normalizer, jokingly, to kind of normalize this data. We've gotten pretty creative in our technical approach, and we're very thankful for a lot of the technical infrastructure that we've had in cloud services, and being able to use that cloud compute that we have with our partnerships with companies like AWS and Microsoft. They've been very instrumental in providing those tools and those services to us. So a lot of that technology investment has come out in spades on the digital side. I can't speak volumes enough about it, of some of the technology that we have at our fingertips that we're trying to use to solve these really difficult issues, from the data to even the application side. As we've mentioned before, contact tracing, it's still there. We're still using it. We're still developing it internally. So being able to have that platform access, the investments that, that Jack has put in place, have really come to fruition. That intentional direction in cloud services has been huge. I can't speak enough about that. Other thing, touch on, more near and dear to my heart, public website. We're still forging ahead on that. We talked a lot about COVID here. Let's not talk about COVID for a second. And the public website project continues to move ahead. We're still on track with that. Look for 2 opportunities from us for public engagement. I'll have more information on that shortly. We're going to be doing a couple of exercises, 2 in fact, for public engagement, and be looking for some feedback from you all. And this is really related to UI and UX of what we're seeing. We've got our first drafts of what it would look like. And I will tell you, I'm very excited about it, of what we're seeing. It's very transformative. The website will not look the same and behave the same. It's going to be a very service-oriented website. So in other words, we want to get people to the services that they need. Pay your bill, order mulch, because we always know we need our mulch. Things like that, getting to CAP to pay your bills, and being able to engage more digitally. If anything, COVID has accelerated the need for this new platform that we're developing with a really great partner called Open Cities. So more to come on that. Future's very bright on that. On that note, I will turn over to Jack.
Thank you.
Well.
Let me take a moment to give a shout out to Mr. Hurley. I don't know if you guys watched the budget hearings of the courts on Thursday afternoon, but you had the circuit court, the juvenile district court, the general district court, all come up and talk about the transformation they had gone through, where they had gone from traditional practices to totally virtual. You had Judge Rucker sitting in front of a Surface Hub saying to the board, I want you to know this is the new Surface Hub that I'm working off of. And you can see everything that's taking place in the courtroom. And the courts asked a question. They said, are you going to go back after the COVID's over and start doing hearings this way, or taking juveniles and moving them from Alexander to Arlington? They said, no way. This is the way of the future. That's a credit to David Hurley. The one name they did not say was David Hurley. He basically transformed the courts. We talk about efforts. He and some of my junior staff spent hours in the courtroom. And I have to tell you, The last time I heard a judge shout out a name, it wasn't. You're in good shape. I'll see you in court tomorrow for further discussion. But David did that, and he did that behind the scenes. And to have transformed an entire body of people who've lived in the same way of doing business for the last 100 years to where they now embrace this. Was it Judge Rucker? I'm trying to think who was the one who said, I now have a magic phone. And they asked, the board asked, what does that mean? That means I can talk to anybody, anywhere, at any time, and I don't have to leave my office. So I wanted to give a shout out to David and the work he's done. Too often, we don't take the time to honor people, and David did an unbelievable job.
Thank you, Jack.
Well, Jack,
Excellent.
would you give him a nap and let him sleep, because that normalizer joke was not funny.
That's how slap happy we are.
That's right.
Trust me, within the circles we're running right now, it was funny.
Okay, well, thanks, Jack. And David, obviously, you're change agent, right? Culture change. It's all about mindset now. So the crisis, some good positive notes in that in terms of catapulting us forward. David, is there anything else, right? You're done with your report then for now?
Yep. Yep.
All right, great. Thank you. And over to Frank, but Mike, did you have a question before we moved?
I did. I did tune in to the DTS budget hearing, which I thought went very well, and the recognition of the potential value of digitization of county services was pretty front and center there. There was also a mention of the broadband and digital services task force work, and it was mentioned in the past tense. And so every month I pretty much ask about that. I'm an avid reader of that. Is there a county manager's digital services and broadband task force report? And how does one get a chance to read it?
As he said in the hearing, and David and I were talking about this today, he said that he just hasn't had a chance to look at it. And that was
I'm not talking about him looking at it. I'm talking about me looking at it.
There's no report. We have no. You mean in terms of, there is a report, yes. It was submitted to him and the county manager, and he's taken it under advisement, but we have not heard any more.
Yeah, Mike, what David and certainly our target is in April that there will be a briefing for us, right? And make the report available before we meet in April. Okay, so that's my my request, because now the board members have your report, so it'd be helpful for us to have and I understand that COVID is going on, but I think it's important for us, for the Tech Commission, to see both of them, right? So that we can, because certainly our county board liaison is asking us what we think, and it'll be helpful to see both. So that's the plan. And I'll let you know if that is not, if there's some major hurdle. I don't foresee any, a major hurdle for us to have it before our April meeting. Do you, I don't know who's next.
Jackie was next.
Jackie? Okay, Jackie, and then John. Thanks, John.
In the past, for these budget work sessions, you've had an opportunity to address the board related to questions or comments. I'm not sure what the time frame was or is for that, but in addition to the letter that we approved, do you have an opportunity to speak, or is that virtual only? I mean, virtually speak.
Right, virtually speak. We did virtually speak. We did present. So
I can see that on the tape then.
Right. You can. And we can, Frank and I can talk a little bit more about it when we move down to 7, Jackie, but yes, and there are some things we'd just like to flag when we get there.
You.
No problem. John?
Yeah, I was just wondering if there was a response to the question that we submitted last month regarding any publicly shareable work with regards to the formation of a wireless services commission.
Yes, good question. That's you were referring to Tim Dempsey and, right?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
question that we had posed at the end of that briefing, because I think we wanted to be supportive of it, but we didn't want to get ahead of county staff if there was publicly shareable work on that, and I didn't want to take Tim Dempsey's word for what happened in various different conversations that there's no documentation of. Not that I don't believe him, but I think, we owed the manager a chance to respond directly to a question.
Right, and there have been some more meetings, John, as you might guess. Jack, do you want to give an update on any of the where it stands? I mean, there's been a couple of more, and if there are some more documentation that we can look at, as opposed to obviously we have a lot from Tim at this juncture.
Right. I know there was a meeting, I think Frank sat on it yesterday with Hillsborough. And I know Tim's been very aggressive to find out what's going on in other jurisdictions. No, but we do not. I mean, there's a number of discussions going on within the county in terms of providing for that wireless strategy, and we have not. It's not going to that. There's no document, no proposal yet on the table.
So is that? I'm sorry,
ahead.
just to clarify, is that you asked the question and got that response, or is that's the official response from the county manager, or is that we don't have an official response yet?
We do not have an official response yet.
Okay, thank you.
And we keep asking for it. I mean, I think it's important to start laying that foundation today. I mean, we're making a lot of progress with the schools, with this 123 Connect Me, and what we're doing wireless there. We're looking at a number of various gates of Boston and whatever in terms of extending digital services. And frankly, one of the things that I put forward in terms of an innovation is informed decision making. The informed decision making is based upon a wireless network that collects information and alerts us to things happening before they happen, much like we're doing in the innovation zone in Clarendon that Holly Hotels working on.
And Jack, don't take me wrong. I don't mean to say that I expect there to be an answer. I'm just trying to clarify whether or not there's a publicly shareable official county position on this topic yet before we go and make a recommendation to the board.
There is not.
Okay.
I can say that.
And John, as an update, and then Frank, if you want to weigh in with what you attended yesterday, we have requested from our county liaison, our board liaison, a discussion about this as well. So Frank and I'll meet with him in, just to begin some of the conversation, John. And you're right, he is going to ask us for what our read is, so we want to collect as much data as we can. So thanks. Frank, do you want to give any more update on yesterday?
I did participate in the meeting. There's extensive participation with Tim's group, the Arl Fiber folks, as well as Catherine Rice from Alexandria's Tech Commission was on. Lou Michael from Jack's shop, who we've heard from in the past, was on for the county, and a very good conversation with both a city official from Hillsborough, Oregon, which is a pretty good size, basically a suburb of Portland, Oregon, to the west of Oregon, about 100,000 population, and almost virtually the same size as Arlington as far as the square footage. So they're less dense than we are, but very similar from that standpoint. They also have Comcast as the incumbent cable and wireless broadband provider, but they actually were a FiOS market. Verizon had built out FiOS there, and then when it was a former GTE system, which became Frontier, Verizon sold to Frontier. Frontier went through a little bankruptcy, and it's now rebranded as Ziply in that market. So they've got fiber to the home from fiber to the home from Ziply, and they've got the hybrid from Comcast there. So very similar in many ways, and I think that was why it was such an. And the highlight is actually their municipal broadband. It just, I think, launched in November, although they've been working on it for a few years. Very. Anyhow, it was very interesting. They're charging $10 a month for eligible households, similar to the Comcast Essentials, providing, I believe, one gig service. But otherwise, for other users, it's $55 a month for the 1 gig service. They don't provide video, so they don't have a cable franchise. They do have a Wi-Fi service to manage the basically provide the router and Wi-Fi router and provide the Wi-Fi service for a $5 a month additional charge. So very interesting. And Tim, I think, reported back on that meeting, and he, is obviously pushing hard for a fiber solution rather than the wireless solution.
Is that conversation recorded somewhere where we can go watch it, Frank?
I'm not sure if it is. I don't know.
Holly's having another session next week.
I was going to mention that Holly's got a meeting with the same individuals next week, and I don't know if there'll be an opportunity, if that will be recorded or if others. But so yeah, I'm not sure if it was recorded or not. I think Tim, I believe, was the host on that.
Yeah.
We can check with him, John.
Yeah.
And then also if we can check
resource
with Holly as well, just to make sure, because I think it, as Frank said, it was a nice comparison, right? Given size, and so good. We'll get that out to everybody. Mike, and sorry, David, I just changed your last name, but Mike, and then David.
Okay, so I just wanted to say, offering Clarendon as a model for this, it leaves me a little bit nonplussed, because I don't yet understand what I would say the policy intentions, the county policy intentions of the Clarendon innovation process. And it may be very promising, but I would say whenever the county is in the role of granting private sector organizations permission to conduct what might seem as a harsh word, surveillance, so we can inform certain decisions, the county should be really clear about what those decisions are. So we kind of went from the having our own wireless offering to using Clarendon as an example of the type of information we hope to be able to supply to decision makers in the county. And I just want to say, I feel very incomplete on even understanding the Clarendon one. And I think it's right in the heart of that broadband and digital services set of policy issues, starting fundamentally with what is the policy objective of granting the data.
Yeah, they're still in the process, formative stages. I know Holly had a discussion with it's primarily public safety, and they had a discussion of use cases on Friday, as recently as Friday, trying to define what are the use cases that they're looking to be able to find. When she can provide the next time she comes back to a meeting here, provide that guidance. But what's really important is the data side of this. No data should be collected unless there's a need to collect that data. And Holly's putting together a group, a steering committee. In fact, I think Jackie Sniller's been recommended, and so is John. From
right, Jackie from EPAC and John from ITAC.
Yeah, and
for the Tech Commission.
And Kevin Broadhurst from will be sitting on a panel from Comcast. And then the two professors that are joining with us. The idea behind that is to really understand what is Mike, you say, is let's get a further definition of what we're trying to do here. Why is it important? I think I sum it up by what Dave Pavlitz, the chief of the fire department, said to me. He said, if there's any way we can shave time off response, to me, that's a plus. That's a good. And so we're trying to identify what that means. And so we're in the first 3 months. This is the ideation phase. What are the ideas? What can we do? Nothing's been done. There hasn't been nothing's been mounted on a pole, nothing. What it is we continue to define what it is we want to do. And it's really important that we're not just testing a technology out, or that we're letting somebody get access to data we haven't seen, that it's really informative in terms of what we're trying to achieve. And we can have metrics we can look back at and say, this is why we did it, and here's what we got. And have that reviewed publicly in a public, transparent fashion. So certainly Holly can talk more eloquently on this than I am, but I think we're still in that phase right now.
Okay, Jackie, and then final, and then we'll move to Frank with the legislative update.
I just wanted to say from both the public safety side and the group that's meeting, the main use case that's been given is Clarendon was in part selected because we have the longest history of public safety information on nightlife related incidents. And the restaurant initiative basically was the police restaurant initiative basically was formed based on a better way to prevent and mitigate nightlife public safety issues that we've had. So crowd management and response is one of the main goals for this, and how that affects both police and public health response. So that's the example that we've been given. And since I've been following this in Clarendon over 20 years or so, certainly we have lots of examples of where better insight into developing situations would have been very useful. And then, of course, as residents, the privacy side and how that could be managed is the other main issue.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. And I know when you all do meet, obviously, you and John will be able to give us some updates on that.
Harry, I had one quick thing.
Yes, go ahead, David.
Big shout out to you and Frank during the budget hearing. Thank you so much for the support during that. It was invaluable. Your feedback, insight, your comments were really helpful to hammer through a lot of the points that that Jack was making of what we're working on, the future of technology in the county. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Well, we care about it, and I think the window of opportunity is closing. So I'm still not happy where we are, but we'll keep pushing, right? Frank, I actually got to you before it was 3 minutes. I'm very happy.
Right. I don't know how I'm going to be able to, but thank you. But while we're on kudos, there's lots of kudos to go around tonight. But actually, our own Jack Belcher, recognized by Government Technology, been recognized as one of the top 25 doers, dreamers, and drivers for 2021. So congratulations, Jack. It's well-deserved recognition. Rip from tonight's headlines here.
Well, I thank you for that, Frank. But it's something I learned a long time ago. Is when you surround yourself with smart people, it makes it easier. And I've got smart people working for me. And frankly, I said that to the board that night in the budget. They're good people, and they have a vision. And folks like yourself being there to assist us. So I thank you all.
Well, congratulations, and you want to keep them. That's the main thing. So.
Yeah, thanks.
Very important. Very important. Let's go. Well, it's also related to some of the discussion we're having. On March 2nd, Governor Northam signed the Consumer Data Protection Act, which will allow Virginia residents to opt out of having their data collected and sold. It's similar to the California law that went into effect last year. Under the new law, residents can see what has been collected and correct or delete it. And it's expected to take effect January 1st, 2023. Traditional U.S. pay TV subscriptions have dropped by nearly 7.2 million in 2020. The cord cutting continues, which is actually important to our legacy function of overseeing the cable franchise. So that's something for us to keep in mind. Bipartisan group of U.S. senators have written a letter to federal broadband policy officials in commerce, agriculture, the FCC, and the NTIA, I believe. Basically called on the Biden administration to update the broadband program baseline speed requirements to reflect existing and anticipated uses, from two-way video conferencing to smart grids and to AI. So they are urging upgrading the broadband speed definition to 100 megabits per second up and down across federal agencies to replace the current patchwork of broadband standards, the current three up 25 down is inadequate to meet the needs of most households, especially as 5G, telehealth, smart grid, IoT, and artificial intelligence continue to take hold. So the letter urges new networks supported by federal funds meet this new higher standard. Amen to that. COVID relief includes 17 billion. The act, which is just adopted, includes $17 billion to expand broadband infrastructure affordability and $7 billion for the E-rate program to support online learning. And actually, Congressman Clyburn has actually, as part of the infrastructure effort, is talking about an $85 billion funding for furthering broadband build out across the country. Congresswoman Eshoo and Congressman Golden, or Congresswoman Golden perhaps, Senator Booker, they've introduced the Community Broadband Act, which would override state laws preventing local governments from operating their own broadband networks. So, might be helpful here in Virginia. FCC is proposing a $25 million penalty for illegal robocalls using spoof caller IDs. That they're pushing health insurance. Anyhow, this is, I believe, the largest fine for illegal robocalls issued thus far by the FCC. The FCC is proposing rules to improve emergency alerts and is exploring whether it is feasible to deliver the EAS alerts through internet, including streaming services. It's possible you may, they're exploring, they're still at the inquiry stage, but to determine the feasibility of whether it is possible to provide emergency alerts when you're watching your Netflix or Prime.
Frank, I think you have a question from Jonathan, so it might be on something you just said, so I'll interject just for a second. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I can wait to the end. It's something earlier, so finish up, Frank, and we'll get into it.
Okay, just checking.
Let's see. Speaking of inquiries, the FCC has initiated an inquiry to explore opportunities and potential challenges presented by open and virtualized radio access networks, the Open RAN, and how the FCC might leverage these concepts to support network security and 5G leadership. Open RAN promotes use of open interface standards that connects wireless devices to the core of the network. Just today, the FCC submitted a report to Congress that was mandated by the Rebounds Act that on the benefits and feasibility of providing public with access to 911 services using Wi-Fi access points during times of emergency when mobile service is unavailable. The report concluded that in the long term, Wi-Fi solutions and other unlicensed spectrum could expand 911 options available to consumers, PSAPs, and complement the transition to IP-based next-gen 911. There are limits right now to the feasibility to unlimited 911 services on Wi-Fi. So the report does say that there needs to be further study and developments before that would be feasible. That's all I've got. But
okay, go ahead, Jonathan.
Well, Frank, I was just going to comment on that. On the 17 billion you mentioned, 10 billion of that is kind of no strings attached money to states. So it's kind of relevant to us that our own Senator, Mark Warner, was very involved at the last minute and basically setting aside 10 billion for that purpose. So Virginia's going to get a big, we think, fairly blank check because the money goes to Treasury to be distributed. And the idea is that states and localities can be places we can experiment on ways of getting access to, schools and health care via broadband networks, it appears. They don't actually mention the word broadband, but that's the only thing that would be a capital project that would allow for that kind of access. So I think you got to be thinking about, what we want Northam to do and what we want Arlington to do with whatever chunk of change we're to get from that, which is fairly substantial. I mean, 10 billion is a lot of money, even by the time it filters down to us. And, we can engage Senator Warner on that as well, see what he had in mind for places like Arlington.
And presumably that could be used for either wireless or fixed, even fixed wireless, but wireless or wireline solutions there.
Jonathan, would you
Right,
mind
we had
sending
Treasury
around
deciding it.
a reference to that so we can get smart on it before the next meeting?
Yeah, it's only about one sentence in the law. It's a very short, so that's why it's hard to kind of tell what they're going to do with it. And then Treasury has to come up with some regulations. Essentially, the Treasury is not an expert agency on broadband, so it's highly unusual. It's essentially they're distributing almost like block grants to states, and we don't know if they're going to put. We don't know yet if they're going to put any parameters around it. But we can certainly send around, Frank, if you want to, or I could, the sentence from the law or summary of the sentence that allocated the 10 billion.
Yeah.
Mark Warner also did a press release on it.
Okay,
But
good.
anything you got would be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. All right. We've got the minutes. You all were Angela, thank you so much again for doing those and getting them out. Does anyone have any changes to any amendments, any additions to the minutes, the February minutes?
I made one addition to add in the question that we had proposed to the manager, and I think Angela said she had updated that, but other than that, I'm good.
Yeah. Okay, great, John. Wonderful. Thank you, Angela. Anyone else? Anything else that you saw that we should change? All right. Hearing nothing, I will entertain motion to adopt.
I so
Anyone?
move.
Thank you, John. Anyone second?
Second.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Frank. And all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Anyone abstain? All right. We have minutes. Excellent. All right. So our budget hearing, which you've heard some about, and Frank and I were obviously there virtually. There was discussion around, obviously we talked about cyber. We also talked about the digital element. There was quite a bit of discussion about that, adding it to the master plan. The county manager thought that would be a huge heavy lift. What we pointed out is there is a statute from Richmond, and so we need a digital plan. So we need to figure out how it's going to be done. If it's not the master plan, then what? So that discussion, I think, is ongoing. Obviously, Jack and his team, I think it was a lot of recognition of how much technology was the lifeblood for the county. Obviously, the county could only do business because Jack and his team provided the infrastructure. So I think in any crisis, there's always these ahas, right? And so I think this just reinforced how much digital is critical. But I also think that there needs to be, we reinforce that there needs to be a real discussion about the planning for digital moving forward and how to institutionalize that. So that was something that we push forward and we'll revisit. Frank, anything else that you wanted to highlight about that?
No, I think part of the resistance to the adding it to the master plan was, I think, just how sort of painful the process has been. I don't think it was anything specifically about digital plan, but really just the process that's involved in getting something added to the master plan. I think that was the impression I had. Wouldn't you agree? I mean,
I do, absolutely. So Jackie, I think did you have a comment? And John?
Comment, yes. Because this commission was on time and ahead of time with their letter, I shared that with EPAC, and much of what was said about cyber in our letter is being echoed in the EPAC letter, which we're voting on tomorrow night. So it wasn't part of the presentation, but it will be part of EPAC's position, and I'll send that to you as soon as we have it approved.
Oh, that's great, Jackie. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think it's really Because there was a moment, I'll relay this, and Jack, you'll correct me if I'm recalling this incorrectly. When you were talking about what happened at Baltimore, and one of the county board members said, "Well, that can't happen here because of what?" And Jack said, "Well, wait a minute. Wait a minute. Let's not rest on our laurels, right?" So it was real. I thought that was a really good aha moment, right? To make sure that people just because, in many ways, it reminds me of the line that the IBM chairman said, "Our success has failed us." We want to make sure that just because Jack and his team have done such a good job thus far, that doesn't mean that, everything will be perfect moving forward. So I think that was, Jack, that was a moment I thought was really important.
It's funny,
And
Mary.
I wanted to say, we also included a paragraph on the importance of continuing to build the IT infrastructure so that all of this rapid development that's been done for COVID gets to be included and built out in more than just emergency use methods. So,
yeah. So true. I was going to say, I vetted that. A number of people came up to me afterwards and said, "Why did you say that?" You would, and so I asked my counsel, Richard Archambault, to chime in. Richard, what were your thoughts about my comment?
I was glad you expressed the right level of concern.
We were too, Richard.
Yeah, I think it's easy to give people false assurances in the space that I live in, and the reality is any day anything could happen. And I like Jack's way of politely pointing that out.
If you'd like, I don't mean to embarrass the gentleman, but I know he's interested in doing that, is Richard Johnson, Frank Johnson, was the CIO in Baltimore. Actually lives in Silver Spring. And he said if ever you wanted to talk to him about what happened.
Oh, that would be yes, we would. Maybe in May. I think that would be really informative for us. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, he'll keep it at a high level. But
That's
it's interesting to hear what he saw and what happened. And what happened to him happened to Atlanta a few months earlier.
Florida.
So he went through it was a very tough time for him, but he's quite a nice guy. So I've got his email and phone. So if you wanted me to invite him at some point, I'd be glad to do that.
Jack, that'd be great. I think for our May would be wonderful. John, and then Mike.
I just wanted to react to the comments about adding things to the comprehensive plan being hard. I think that's not a good reason for us not to do something. And I think time and time again, we encounter issues in this commission and in the county government where there is no policy framework. There just is no policy framework for us to lean back on. There is no vetted community engagement, no policy framework whatsoever, no sense of where the community's values and priorities are in this space. And so us, merry band of warriors here, are doing what we can, but it's just because it's hard is not a reason not to do it. That's all.
Agreed. And that's why you'll see on the tape that I came back and said, you don't have any choice. You have to have a digital plan. How you do it, but you have to have one. Mike?
I would just add to that, the important thing to be prepared to talk about too is there are lots of things the Commonwealth puts into statutes and requires us to do. They don't often penalize us for not doing them.
Right. Well, I didn't add that, Richard.
Yeah, that's always a challenge. Like, okay, we should do it, but we're not penalized if we don't. So that's the hard sell, right?
Yes. Good point. Good point. Mike, you've been patient. Apologize we didn't get you.
Oh, no problem. I just wanted to endorse the mature technocratic answer to the cybersecurity risk question. I'm completely on board with not making false promises. And then I would say, and some of you may be aware of this, I hope it's true, but you're certainly welcome to use this with the folks who are posing these types of questions about what the risk level is. I believe the Baltimore hack specifically was executed using tools that were exfiltrated from the National Security Agency. And so if NSA was unable to hang on to exploitation tools such that people couldn't use them in bad ways against municipalities. Who are we to be protecting our assets? You know, so those originated from the highest security location in the federal government. And if they were bested, then I would say humility is a good posture for us to take.
Well said. Well said. And
Yeah,
I
well
will.
said, Frank.
Well said. Mike, you mean?
Mike, I'm sorry. Mike, yeah.
Sorry,
I was
Jack.
looking at Frank.
Zoom fatigue.
I know.
I did want to. I know Denise isn't here, but I did want to thank her for her service. And she's, as you probably saw in the email, launched her new business and finding it, you know, as it is the new baby that requires a lot of attention. So we wish her well. And she is recommending some people to fill that slot. So we're delighted. Frank and I'll be interviewing them. But we didn't want this this meeting to go by without thanking Denise, and we will send her a note as well. But just wanted to give her a shout out. This is the night for shout outs, I see. We're 1 minute over, but I will I will entertain a move to adjourn.
So moved.
I will move. I had to unmute. So.
Okay, I was going to say, are we that excited about staying? I don't know.
But actually, I did want to say solar winds is another reason to be humble there.
Humble. Yes, exactly right. Yes.
But I will move that re-adjourn.
All right, Frank, and a second?
I second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Have
Excellent.
a
All
good
right.
night, everybody. Take care.
Good night. Thanks,
Yeah,
everybody.
thank
See
you.
you in April. We'll be in touch with a couple of those items. And thanks again, Angela. Take care.
Yes, thanks, Angela.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Good
Thanks,
night.
David. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.